Welcome, everyone, to Ars Divina. As a reminder, this podcast delves into the connection between theology and art. I'm your host, Corey Dixon, and today I have a guest, my good friend, Serge Danielson-Francois. Serge has a long history as a librarian and is an educator at the Academy of the Sacred Heart in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan.
Thank you, Corey. I'm happy to be here. Happy that we'll be discussing together one of my favorite poems, Ash Wednesday by T.S. Eliot, and looking for that intersection between the aesthetic, poetry of it, and our continued search for the divine.
Excellent. Thank you. So this is going to be a multi-part discussion. And in this first episode, we're going to be discussing part one of the poem. So I'd like to start by just saying I'm going to admit, while I do have, a history of reading Eliot and some of his more notable works, this poem in particular was new to me until you introduced it to me, Serge. So would you like to share a little bit about your history? I know you have a longer experience with it, and so.
I think what you're saying is that I'm old. Yes, I first encountered this poem in 1986. So we're going back a ways. That's what, 40 some odd years ago. And my teacher, Emma Gilby, introduced me to The Wasteland first, and then had us read the rest of Eliot. So Proof Rock, Gerontian. But Ash Wednesday is probably the poem that has stuck with me the longest. When I was a librarian in Houston and I helped run a lifelong learning program, we had a number of retirees who worked through this poem with me over the course of about 5 or 6 weeks. So.
Nice, thank you. So we're gonna start with just part one. That's what we're going to discuss at the moment, and then I can read it, or maybe you would like to read it. But I think we should
I'd be
read
happy
it.
to, yeah, I'd be happy to read the first stanza, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about where we think we are at the end of the first stanza and where Eliot would like to take us.
Sure, sounds good. Why don't we do that?
Because I do not hope to turn again, because I do not hope, because I do not hope to turn, desiring this man's gift and that man's scope. I no longer strive towards such things. Why should the aged eagle stretch its wings? Why should I mourn the vanished power of the usual rain? I think at the end of the first stanza, we've been introduced to a man who's resigned. And I think when we were speaking about this poem together earlier, I said, I'd like to think that it is Ash Wednesday, that this is a penitent in line, unsure that the ashes on the forehead can actually send him on a journey towards redemption, or at least through the Lenten period. And on the other side of that, possibly brought back by Christ into the beloved community. So this is a resigned person who cannot do what we are asked to do when we receive the ashes, which is turn away from sin and remember your baptism. So that's how this first stanza strikes me. But I'd be interested to see if for you it takes on a different meaning.
Yeah. So we talked about this before. I had been wrestling with what it is about not wanting to turn again, and you pointed out it's not want. The word he uses is hope. It's interesting. In my last video, I was on Christian hope, and that sort of certainty we have in Christian hope. The because we know that God will win the victory in the end, despite whatever may be happening. So the idea that I do not hope to turn again is shows that he really you convinced me. I didn't start out in this position, but you convinced me that Eliot is speaking here in a way to say that he doesn't have that conviction that all will be good in the end. At least here at the beginning of this poem, as we see.
I think there's something reassuring in his candor and his honesty, in his acknowledgement that it's just beyond him in the place where he finds himself right now to even begin to articulate hope. Um, and that is so counterintuitive, as you say, to the places where we usually look in literature for echoes of spirituality. We don't usually look in the place where the person finds himself in the desert, not the oasis. And so a lot of imagery, even in this first stanza, the eagle, for example, you and I had a chance to talk about on eagle's wings is what we would hope. That we would be carried on eagle's wings by God's grace. But here it's an aged eagle, no longer ready, no longer able to stretch his wings, or at least it's called into question. Why should the aged eagle stretch its wings? And then finally, I think the last line, usual rain, really, thy kingdom come, the sort of the Lord's prayer that again is just not escaping the mouth of this particular penitent in the real despair, regret, uh, void that Eliot finds himself in stanza one.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned again on Eagle's Wings because that song is pulling from Psalm 91, like it's a version of Psalm 91. And as you mentioned about like this kind of honesty, I always think that the Psalms are some of the most honest places in the Bible. Well, first of all, I think the Bible altogether is a very emotionally honest book in the sense that how many religious books starts with God's chosen people and then continually shows them failing to live up to the calling that they have, but then I feel like the Psalms in particular are very emotionally honest there that they there are times when the psalmist really doesn't feel like he's the treatment is just. And he calls God out for that. But then there are many other times where the psalmist is like, yes, I know I am a wretched sinner. I've done the wrong things. Please have mercy on me. But I understand if you wouldn't because I don't really deserve it in that. So
And
this
again,
is
I
this
think
is
that
maybe
it's a
this is
bracing honesty.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, this is Eliot's psalm in a sense, right? His with that bracing honesty, as you mentioned. So,
I think he builds on this in the second stanza. And so when we get to I do not hope to know again the infirm glory of the positive hour, I do not think, I know I shall not know, I cannot drink. And there's this real sense of back to this imagery of the desert, and we've spoken together about Exodus being the real template for the journey of faith. This Exodus journey is one where we are far from Egypt. We are probably plaintively lamenting what we left behind, and as you said brilliantly, we're not yet God's new people in the promised land. And so that's where I think Eliot has us in stanza two.
yeah. Why don't we read through stanza two? Would you like to read it there so
Sure.
that
Because I do not hope to know again the infirm glory of the positive hour, because I do not think, because I know I shall not know the one veritable transitory power, because I cannot drink there where trees flower and springs flow, for there is nothing again. And when I read this with you just last night, I said, I can't help but hear an echo of Eliot speaking about being on Margate Sands, where he could connect nothing with a lowercase n to nothing with an uppercase n. Um, this real distance from meaning and this real distance from connection. Uh, but I think always embedded in each of these stanzas is something sacramental, something of the culture and the history of the church writ large. And I would say the veritable transitory power for me is he can't take Eucharist. This is the I wish I could get the ashes in stanza one and the Eucharist in stanza two.
I remember in my first class with David Tracy at the University of Chicago that he was talking about three different kinds of images of God. And my understanding, this is an undeveloped project that people always hoped he'd write on, and I don't know that he ever wrote on it, but he talked about the open, the void, and the face. And I feel like really here we have. the God of the void, the presence in absence, kind of thing. So,
I think that's wonderful. I think, particularly because you're an artist as well, this idea of negative space, uh, and
mhm.
what negative space invites us to do.
Yeah, so it's always there's that little kind of gimmicky but still fun thing to where they sometimes you'll see words that are written where they've just cut off or actually enclose the negative space instead of the letters, and so then you find the letters, especially when they're created in 3D. It's a bit kitsch, but still, that it's a good example for this. When they're created in 3D and the negative space is like cut out blocks, then you're so used to focusing on what the cutout blocks are, but then I'm sorry, the what's normally negative space is cutout blocks, so it's be positive space in that, and then you start focusing on the negative space, and you realize that that space is forming a word and a message that's coming to you. Uh, in
I
that,
think that message comes through in the third stanza, where what you just mentioned about David Tracy comes through with the blessed face. So it's a renunciation of the blessed face, but it is still acknowledgement that like God is still searching for T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot is unsure that he is deserving of the God who's searching for him. Um, if I may read the third
yeah, yes,
stanza.
please go ahead.
Because I know that time is always time and place is always place and only place, and what is actual only for one time and only for one place. I rejoice that things are as they are, and I renounce the blessed face and renounce the voice, because I cannot hope to turn again. Consequently, I rejoice, having to construct something upon which to rejoice. And so you had mentioned the face, the voice, the void,
Yeah.
and all these begin to crystallize in this third stanza, where he must find solace and comfort in the fact that he can find no solace and comfort. It is at least the bottom. There's nowhere else to go. There's no basement below this basement. So there is something in finally being able to place your foot somewhere, finding a foothold, as it were, to begin to work back up in a very Dantesque way, back
Yes.
up the mountain in Purgatorio is what's coming to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I wrestled with this when I first read it here and questioning about that, renouncing the blessed face and renouncing the voice, and I really struggled with what he was meaning and why he would be renouncing it. But in our discussions, I came convinced that it's not so much that he doesn't want it, but that he doesn't feel himself worthy to be able to be accepted in that way. That it's kind of
I
pulled away
agree. So
from it.
once he has found his footing, this is what will lead him to pray. And that's what we get in the next stanza. And pray to God, have mercy upon us. The sort of miserere that we are hearing come through. And I pray that I may forget these matters that with myself I too much discuss, too much explain, because I do not hope to turn again. Let these words answer for what is done, not to be done again. May the judgment not be too heavy upon us. And I think when we escape solipsism, when we escape the conversation with ourselves alone, when we can get back to the table and break bread, I think that is when we can pray. We can pray for something like mercy. We can pray for something like grace. And that's what's coming through for me in this next stanza. But I'm
Yeah,
interested to see what you see.
oh yeah, no, I was really moved by your thoughts when we discussed this earlier, and when you focus on that these matters with myself, I too much discuss that he's not. You mentioned he's not talking with the priest, he's not talking with other people in line for the confessional. Like he's not at that stage in the Ash Wednesday sort of experience, the Lenten experience. He is um, really down at the beginning, down at the bottom there. He is not ready to to seek the forgiveness because he doesn't think he's worthy of it. And this is something he's just dwelling in himself on that, and he has to get out of that. Um, And so
Yeah.
that's where he's talking about that forgetting that these things, that all the stuff that he's been dealing with up to this point, that's all for him. And it's this negative unworthiness and inability that to find hope that God will be merciful in there.
I think if it's a prayer that echoes De Profundis, right? It is from this deep, dark well, from the place of abandonment. From my wife and I used to watch a show called Babylon 5, and at one point there's a sort of a season-ending episode where Captain Sheridan finds himself in Zahadun, the place where hope is no longer. That's where Eliot is at the bottom. But recognizing what he can't do alone. That's why I think in the next stanza, because these wings are no longer wings to fly, but merely vans to beat the air which is now thoroughly small and dry, smaller and drier than the will. Teach us to care and not to care. Teach us to sit still. And I thought, sit still and know that I am God. That's what's still somehow working as a message that from long ago, from when he was confident, from when he was comfortable, it's seed that still can take root again, even in this place of no hope. And the not caring is maybe not judging himself too much. And the caring is the remembering that he is a child of God. And if those two things can be held in tension, I think we get to the pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Pray for us now and at the hour of our death. The first, but not the last of the Marian invocations that we will hear.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, we have those wings that mentioned the wings again. So that's that eagle imagery, that noble imagery, that sort of divine, which I think is sometimes used with God the Father. Certainly, we have Zeus. Any sort of sky god. The eagle is that image, and yet these are ones that can't do it. And so it's just kind of undermining that the that Ellie himself being that maybe that aged eagle, like is it's a sort of a feeling of undermining the nobility, and then that he has there, that he can't live up to that. But then that place of stillness, and as you mentioned, then the invocation, because it's the intercession, the looking to somebody outside of him. This is the escaping of the solipsism that you were talking about. He like up to this point, he can't do it because he is on his own trying to do this, and now he's finally found a way of breaking out of being on his own. He's now invoking the communion of saints that to help in his plight.
I think it's this great escape that will lead us into our next episode when we take on part two.
Yeah, so this has been great, and we'll be back in a moment for part two.